Hey, everybody. All right, so we're going to talk today about the second episode of the second season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which I'm very excited about. This second episode was just incredible. I just got to say right from the top. Mind-blowingly good. If you haven't seen it, watch it, of course, make sure you do, because it's built so well. It's structured in such a way that it really has an emotional impact on you, which is nice, without being manipulative, which is good. Good. It is a super dark episode. It's kind of bleak, to be honest with you. It has a lot to say about society and where we've come from and where we're going and all that kind of stuff. It's a very heavy one, and that's Star Trek's very good for that. A lot of science fiction is very good for that. Most science fiction is thinly veiled social issues. It's funny when I see people say things like, "Don't put politics in my sci-fi," and like, there's no sci-fi I can think of that isn't political in some way. You know what I mean? Everything from Lovecraft to Star Wars. Star Wars is just straight up the American Revolution, I assume. Most of the bad guys are English, and it's a revolution, and the revolutionaries are like this ragtag band. It's pretty blatant all the way across. But Star Trek especially is built for that. Star Trek wants to do that. It wants to critique society through its episodes. And this episode does an amazing job of it. Okay, so it does start. There are a couple light moments throughout, which is good. You need a little bit in there, right? The first one being Pike trying to trying to convince the lawyer to work with Una. She doesn't want to do it because they have a history. I have a very squeaky chair. I'm sorry. She doesn't want to work with Una because Una in the past has hidden her nationality, I guess, right? There's something special about these Illyrians. They augment their own genes, and that's illegal in Starfleet. And Una has been able to hide it the whole time and has chosen to hide it. And that makes her kind of suspect to other Illyrians who can't hide it or choose not to, right? So Pike has to go try to convince this lawyer to come and help Una. And the only way he can get a meeting with her is by basically nearly killing himself in the lobby by not having oxygen to breathe. It's pretty comical, and it says a lot about him and his relationship with Una, and it's really nice. And the lawyer, of course, sees him, right? Because clearly he's not going anywhere. That's great. There's also a fun Spock moment where he abruptly stands up and considers it a massive outburst of emotion that he's embarrassed to admit to, which I really love. I love that Gene Roddenberry, along with Leonard Nimoy, figured out a character that we can so easily enjoy and so easily respect and want to watch. It's weird. For instance, okay, here's a weird thing. In The Next Generation, they had Worf. Worf was a very popular character. But most of the time, I felt like Worf was not being treated with the respect that the other crew members were. It's just weird to watch The Next Generation and to see Worf get in trouble episode after episode. And he doesn't get in trouble the same way the other characters do. Right? If Data does something that's weird, Picard sits down with him and explains to him that he really respects him and he wants him to do well, and this is not a thing he should be doing. Whereas with Worf, he just yells at him. And I can see that maybe the writers are thinking we have to treat Worf like crap because that's the way Klingons want to be treated, and it's the way that they respect the person who's treating them like crap. Maybe. And I know I'm being a little extreme about this, but if you go back and watch and you just look at the weird things that Worf goes through, yeah, it's very interesting. But all of that aside, Spock is treated more like Data is, which is a great thing, I think. I think that we as an audience can love Spock and still laugh at the fact that he feels like he's got some kind of social faux pas. Well, when he's with humans, we didn't even notice. You know, we don't understand the way that they work. But the way that they work is so unoffensive to humans. You know, I mean, I can see that being purely logical could get a little weird for humans, and they do that a lot in Star Trek. They have Vulcans that are just like, what are you talking about? You know, like the bad guy in this show. I use the term bad guy, but that's a harsh judgment on the characters in this show because there aren't bad guys, which is really cool. We'll go into that in a second. But I really appreciate that because Spock's half human, he doesn't go to the pure logical place that would begin to get weird for humans. He can't quite get there because he's half human, right? So he's got these emotions that he's tangling with. And it's wonderful to see a character tangle with emotions, but not be a raging lunatic, right? His idea of messing up emotionally is so tiny that we almost find it funny that he would even think that that's a problem. But he does think it's a problem. You know, it makes him very endearing, and I really appreciate that. So Spock does that in this episode, and it's kind of funny, right? We can laugh about it. He feels a little bit bad, but they assure him we're not going to tell anyone. Everything's okay, you know. So it's all good. All right. So there are a couple light moments, but overall this is a very dark episode, and it's what Star Trek is built to do, and I'm glad that they're willing to do it, and I hope we see more of this. I love the light side of this show. I love it. It's so much fun. But if we ever want to get a City on the Edge of Forever or anything like that, they have to be willing to be dark like this, and that's good. Okay, so I'm not going to break everything down, right? We're just going to talk about the stuff that we find fascinating because I'm assuming you've seen it and you don't need to hear a big recap. Leanne, who's the head of security, has a very interesting moment with the lawyer in this episode because she's afraid that she's the reason that Una's in trouble. She thinks that a private recording that she made got stolen and given to Starfleet, and that's how Starfleet knows that Una's an Illyrian. It's a nice kind of subplot because we can see how, first off, we get to see the way Uhura reacts to it, right? Because Una says, I want you to do something illegal. I want you to track all of the private recordings and find out if anybody said anything about Una. We need to find out who turned her in. And Uhura says, that's illegal. I'm not doing it. And I'm not doing it because you're my friend and you will get in trouble for it. I won't get in trouble for it because it's a direct order from a superior officer. But I'm going to deny that. I'm not doing that because I don't want you to get in trouble for that, which is really cool. I really love that Starfleet characters will put themselves in danger before they put someone else in danger. You know, it's really neat. And Lan's not happy about it. And hopefully that's not something that they try to drag through into other episodes. They don't wrap it up, which I feel a little bit bad about. I wish that she would have gone to Uhura and said, thank you, everything worked out, everything's good. You know, I wish that would have happened. We can just assume it's true, I think, because we're watching Star Trek. I just don't want 3 episodes down the road for Leanne to be like, I don't know about Uhura. You know, we don't need to get into any of that crap, which is where most television shows would go, I believe. But this show does not have to go there. So I wish they would have wrapped it up, but it's okay. Let's just assume it's done. Everybody's cool. We'll talk more about Leanne later. I appreciated that when the trial started, this whole episode's a trial episode. And they did, it's actually a pretty good trial episode in addition to being a good Star Trek episode. Like the Data episode, the Data trial episode, or the Spock trial episode from the original series. Both of those are great Star Trek episodes, and they deal with very important issues. But I don't believe that they are also structured as fun courtroom episodes. And fun's probably the wrong word, but this one is very well crafted so that you can see, oh, that's how they deal with that. That's how she was able to continue to be the first officer. We all knew she was going to continue to be the first officer, but this is how she was able to do that, and that's a neat thing. You know, it's not just we are good people and we see that this should happen. She literally finds a law that makes sense, that kind of works, and I appreciate that. We'll talk more about that in a minute, too, because it's not perfect, but it's pretty cool. It works. So, when the trial starts, the bad guys, right, who aren't bad guys, it's really neat that the lawyer who's prosecuting this case is Pike's girlfriend. And I don't know if that's the terminology they would use, right, because Pike's Kirk, you know, he's sleeping around with other aliens, and it's not as extreme. I think there's only been one example where he goes to bed with another person, but clearly he has a relationship with this lawyer. Okay, we see it in the first episode of the first season. So she wants to protect Una through the law. She doesn't want to break the law, but she wants to protect Una. So she's doing things to get her as safely secured without going to prison or any of that kind of stuff as she can, right? She tries to protect her. And it kind of comes up in the end, which is cool. First, she tries to get her a plea deal. It's not a great deal that she gets her, right? Una would be kicked out. She'd have a dishonorable discharge, but she wouldn't do any time. She would just go on as a normal citizen, right? She could continue hiding. Nobody would tell anybody, and it would be over. Of course, Una doesn't want that, right? Her military career is important to her, as it probably would be to anybody, I'm assuming. The prosecutor gets up and says tinkering with DNA is playing God, and that's bad. And her example, of course, is the eugenics wars, which were horrible for Earth in this story. And I really appreciated that they had the lawyer bring up God, because it's weird. In Star Trek, God isn't a thing, right? And I'm not saying for anybody. Of course there are religious cultures, but it's a little bit like money. If you go back to the first series, and even some of the Next Generation in the beginning, the idea that a culture would worship a god sort of indicated that they were an immature culture, that they hadn't grown enough yet in order to go out among the stars, certainly, right? So it's weird that they brought up God in this, like that's supposed to have some kind of power over this court, when I don't believe it would in any way. But I appreciated it because I think it's a common tactic for stuff that's occurring today to say God wouldn't approve of that, therefore I have the right to treat that person like crap. You know what I mean? Religion is used as a tool to force people to behave the way you want them to behave in our modern society, which is kind of strange because we were sort of getting away from that, I felt, but it's back. In America, it's very back. I don't want to say that it's really powerful, but it certainly can make people's lives miserable. Guaranteed. There's enough people that are zealots like that, that they can kind of throw this country into chaos, you know. I do hope that reasonable people who aren't part of some crazy cult or even very established working religions but have become zealots, I would hope that normal people understand the importance of getting out and voting and of being a part of, even on the internet, being some type of a part of a discussion, so that this small minority doesn't just blast everything, you know, because they're pretty organized, and the more organized normal people are, the better, because there are more normal people, but normal people become kind of lax about their duties to society because there's so many of them, you know. And especially if you live in a state that is, because of the way our system is set up for presidential voting, if you live in a state that already votes Democrat, then your vote doesn't matter, which is really bizarre. If you know, and you never know, you should get out and vote, right? But if you know, like if you live in Chicago, right, you know it's going to be a Democratic vote, but you still should vote. Let it be a Democratic vote with your help. Sorry, that was a whole side thing. Anyways, they get up, they talk about God, which I thought was cool because it makes them the bad guy. Straight up, it makes them the bad guy. God is used as a tool by bad people to either make money or to control society, right? God should be something that's personal, right? We have not learned to mind our own business yet. And that would only be step one. If all of us could just mind our own business, the world would be a better place. But there are things we'd have to do beyond that, of course. But yeah, so I love that they brought up God as their reasoning behind the fact that this is bad. So then the defense goes on, and this is part of the interesting plot that they created. They did this neat thing where they set it up so that in the trial, the lawyer figures out that the best defense for Una is to come to Starfleet requesting safety, asylum, right? She needs to request asylum. That's her only way out. Now, I do want to point out, I had a small problem with this, which is receiving asylum does not guarantee you get to keep your job. And they sort of made those two go hand in hand in this episode, which wasn't the perfect solution to make a truly excellent court drama. But it's still pretty cool that she found this asylum. I don't want to call it a loophole. They're careful about that in the episode to say the law is you cannot be genetically manipulated. And the law is also, if you're in trouble, you get to ask for asylum. Those are both laws. Neither one of them is a loophole. It's a fact. It's a law, right? So she says, even though these lies occurred in the past, her actions, which put her in this trial, were her asking for asylum. Now, she also got to keep her job. Okay, fine. You know, we want her to be number one, of course. And that's kind of a nice testament to saying that Starfleet are just good people. If you're in trouble, you can go to Starfleet, right? They are good people, and they'll figure something out, which is nice. And that's the assumption that I think is being made when she gets to keep her job. Yeah, and I appreciate that over Starfleet's the bad guy, right? Starfleet's been infiltrated. And it's okay every once in a while, right? The new season of Picard was that. And it was okay because in that one, well, in all of the infiltrated episodes, I do believe that it's not Starfleet people that are acting evil. It's people that have replaced Starfleet people, right? Either they have a bug inside of them that's controlling them, or in the Picard one, there's the people who can shapeshift, right? Odo's group of people. So, yeah. I appreciate Starfleet just being the good guys. And in this case, that's what it was, which was great. The bad guys, the other lawyers, one of them was just trying to protect Una the whole time. And the other one is a Vulcan and just hardcore, these are the facts. I don't care. I have no emotion. These are the facts. It's like a robot running the proceedings, right? Which was just fine. They're Vulcans, you know. Okay. So the defense turns around and attacks the admirable April, who we've seen a few times throughout this. And they do a little trick, and this is slightly manipulative. And I want to be clear. I got to be careful when I use that term, because I really hate truly manipulative film work. Stuff that just lies, just straight up lies in order to make you be in a certain position or whatever. And this does not do that in any way. What they do, though, is they have the Admiral kind of look like an idiot on the stand so that later she can say, you let that Admiral look like an idiot on the stand because captains get to do the things that made him look like an idiot. And because captains get to do the things that make them look like an idiot on the stand, you have to let Pike go, because he did something that makes him look like an idiot on the stand, but captains get to do that. Right? So it's really twisty. It's really strange. I feel like they made him look like an idiot so that we would be worried that Una's defense wasn't working. Instead of going, wow, I wonder why she was pointing out that captains had the freedom to break the law as long as they were doing it for the right reasons. Instead of us being able to ponder that question and in the end going, oh, because Captain Pike granted asylum, which is against the law, but it's not. Right? Captains get to do that. Instead of us pondering that, we literally were going, wow, she does not care about Una at all. She probably wants to martyr Una so that she can in the future fight for other causes and talk about Una being imprisoned wrongfully, and you know what I mean. Right? They wanted us to be afraid for Una instead of wondering what this lawyer is up to. You know? And that became a tiny bit heavy-handed for me. I would have rather wondered what the lawyer was up to than thought, oh man, Una's in trouble. You know? Because this lawyer hates her or whatever, right? So that was a little weird. That was a tiny bit heavy-handed for me, but it still works. It still helps build this case, which is kind of cool to see in a Star Trek trial. I appreciated that. All right. There's a really neat little scene. Once April gets humiliated on the stand, he goes to confront Pike. I don't think he goes to confront him. I think he goes to just find out what the heck is going on. Where did this lawyer come from? La, 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 right? And the scene opens with him saying, so you recommended the lawyer. So now he's pissed at Pike, right? And they do this really neat thing with blocking that I want to point out. I believe, I'm going to say this now, I think that this is my favorite director that we've seen in doing these Star Trek episodes. Now, I don't remember this person's name. I need to get the person's name, and I need to go back and see if they've directed other episodes so far, and hope that they direct more episodes in the future, right? But I do want to point out there's 3 factors, of course. There's the director, the writers, and the actors. All of them have to work together. And this episode really worked together, which is amazing. So it makes me want to document who this director is so I can look for other stuff. But they have this moment where Pike has 2 drinks. The guy's talking to them. He reaches his hand out in order to offer a drink to his friend, right? His co-worker. I'm not sure exactly what their relationship is, but he offers him a drink. The person doesn't acknowledge that the drink has come forward, finishes his phrasing, turns and leaves. And then they do this cut to show him exiting. They cut to the door. And then you see the April walking towards the door. Pike still standing there with his hand out. And then slowly turns, pours the drinks together, and drinks it. Because he hurt his friend's feelings, right? Which is super cool. I loved that storytelling. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because for an actor, it would be very difficult to do that second shot. Now, I don't believe that they may have had 2 cameras set up, right? But they also were getting Pike. So then that would be a 3-camera setup. This is television. I don't know how extensive all that is, but I imagine that they said cut and then Pike just froze. Probably not, because they had to reset up. Pike remembered the way he was standing. They reset up, shooting from the door. Pike got back in that position. While he walked away, I mean, how awkward it would feel to be holding 2 drinks like this, not watching the person go, just standing there, and then turning, bringing them together, pouring it in, and drinking it. And I really appreciate that telling the story was more important than making the actors feel natural. It's a weird subject. If you have a real method actor, they would never go for any of that, right? You'd probably need to set up 3 cameras and just say, go, and just stand back so you don't get hit, right? But with a real actor, with a person who understands that their job is to help tell the story, not to just be the focus of everything all the time. Their job is to help tell the story. Pike, I really respect this person as an actor because hopefully he didn't throw a fit about this. I sincerely doubt that he did. He told the story. He was able to go through that 3-hour process of offering a drink. The person turns and walks away. He turns, puts them together, and takes a drink. That took a long time. And he was able to maintain those positions and move through that. And all the actors on this show are doing that. It's incredible, right? If you watch. But Pike really, he's really in it to win it. You know what I mean? He's very good and he's very dedicated. And all of them are. I don't want to say that he's better than the other actors. It's just that I notice more, and it could be because he's the lead. It could be because he's a type of actor like me. I'm going to go into type later when we talk more about Kirk. But actors have types, right? There are certain roles that actors would play. And of all of the cast in Star Trek, Pike is the closest to the role I would play. I am not Pike's type. I'm not saying I could play Pike. He's just the closest to what I could play. I would just play a general, right? They just have me up there for 4 minutes going, look, all you got to do is get in there, all right? Just get in there and get it done. Over, right? That's all I would do in the show. But he's the closest to that type, to my type. So I notice more for him, maybe, right? Good. So I appreciated that moment. I appreciated the work that they put into to tell that story. And it was so clean. It was so clear that Pike was disappointed in what he had done to his friend. But hopefully it works out, right? Right. Good. Okay. All right. So Pike stuff. Good. They have this wonderful montage of people being witnesses for Una's character, right? They just go through, and it's very emotional, which is good. It's weird. Once again, going back to manipulative versus just emotional. Sad stories are emotional, period. They're not manipulative, right? When somebody tells you that one of their close relatives has passed away, they're not manipulating you, right? They're telling you what happened, and that's sad. It's sad that that occurred, right? So I really appreciated that this montage was just people saying good things. That's it, right? Spock had his little Gilbert and Sullivan moment, which I didn't quite understand. That was a little weird. I think it was just kind of thrown in as a tiny gag because Spock can't lie, right? So there's this short that occurred, I don't know, 3 years ago or something. It's been a long time. And it indicated that this show might exist, which I was so happy for. That short was the best one of them all, just because it was saying we might get old Star Trek back, right? But in it, Spock first meets her, and I think he's nervous I'm trying to recall. It's been a long time since I've seen it. But I think he's nervous. So he is very, professional, straightforward. She is as well, because she's never met him before, or I don't think. But then the elevator gets jammed, and they're stuck. And they spend a long time together. And throughout this short, where they're stuck in the elevator, she confesses to Spock that she likes Gilbert and Sullivan musicals. And I think she even sings a little bit, which a weird thing for me. Star Trek's my favorite show. But within my favorite show, there are tiers of favoriteness, right? My least favorite is I call them the holodeck episodes, but they don't always take place on the holodeck, right? Like that short was a good example where they were basically showing off that she could sing. They did this little Gilbert and Sullivan thing. Star Trek likes to be fun and it likes to be cute. And those are my least favorites of my favorite stuff, right? So I love them, but they're my least favorite of my favorites, right? But in relation to this, I found it a little bit odd that Spock felt like she was hiding something, even though it's the first thing he learned about her, which was a little bit strange. Like she wasn't hiding it from Spock. Now, she could be hiding it from others, and maybe he was suggesting that he knew that she was hiding something. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe the dialogue was just a tiny bit off for me. I'm not sure. I've watched it a couple times now, and I didn't really think of that until just now. So I feel like maybe that moment could have been a tiny bit cleaner. Like if she would have said, did she tell you? No. Do you know, was she hiding anything from the crew? Then he could have said, yes, she likes Gilbert and Sullivan. Right. I'm not sure though. Good. But the montage is amazing, right? The way they put it together, it's very heartfelt. The actors are great. It really works. It's good. All right, so we go back to the personal logs, and this was a tiny bit confusing for me. My first watch. My second watch, it kind of cleaned up a little bit. But in my first watch, so La'an is talking to the lawyer. And the lawyer says, oh, hey, by the way, did you ever figure out that thing you were looking for where you wanted to prove that they stole that information? Who turned her in? Where did they steal it? And she says, I didn't figure it out. I don't know. I have no idea. And then the lawyer says, your family has a history of augmentation, right? Well, first she says, you think you turned her in, right? And La'an says, yes, I think I turned her in. I made a personal log. I think they stole it. And she says, and this got a little unclear for me, because she goes into, you're not a bad person, which is kind of a leap, but it's important. I like that it's in there, right? She says, why were you mad at Una? Because she lied to me. And she says, well, it's deeper than that, right? And she kind of becomes a psychiatrist, I guess. I think that's the right word for it. Where she says, isn't it that you are afraid that the augmentations of your ancestors are going to suddenly awaken in you and you're going to become this horrible monster? And she says, yes. And it sounds weird trying to explain it, and I think that's why it got a little muddy in the show as well. But I'm glad that they did it. I'm glad that they went there so that we could understand basically the way that culture thinks of messing with genetics, right? The idea that if you mess with your genetics too much, you become a monster. You hate humans and you try to kill them if you mess with your genetics too much. And we don't know where the line is for too much. We don't know when you'll become that monster. We don't even know if your kids will become that monster or if your ancestors will become that monster, right? And I really appreciated that sort of paranoia because it allows them to go into the idea of somebody feeling like they're bad because society has told them they're bad. And that's the real issue, right? That getting through all of that muck to get to that was great. I'm really glad we got to that so that she could realize, and probably not realize, but at least be aware that the way she feels about herself is not her own doing. She can change the way she feels about herself because that's not really how she feels about herself. That's how people have told her to feel about herself. So that's cool. I really liked getting to that. But it sort of muddied up the scene a little bit, getting to that, because then she says it would take forever for them to legally get your voice things. So they didn't, which didn't make a lot of sense to me because she's saying, no, they got it illegally. You're right. The process to get it legally would take forever, but she's saying it was stolen. But that works. Okay, so I guess we're just supposed to, okay, it wasn't stolen. It didn't really work for me, but it's what the plot is. So she decides, okay, it wasn't stolen. So then they say, all right, if the government didn't steal it, then somebody else turned her in. Who? And she says, I don't know. I don't have any idea. I haven't even thought about it, right? Because she thought she did it. But then she says it would have to be someone who has something to gain. And the lawyer deduces from that sentence that the only person on that entire ship that had anything to gain from turning in the number one officer was the number one officer. And once again, in today's, that doesn't fly at all with me in today's society, right? I guess it's a testament to Starfleet to say people don't work that way in this society. The only person who had something to gain was Una. That was it. She's the only person that could gain from turning her in. So, okay, right? I'm okay with that. That was a little weak. Let's just put it that way. To me, that was a little bit weak. I am so happy that it was Una. You know, don't get me wrong. I don't want there to be some person who wants Una's job who through the next 6 seasons is chasing her around. You know, please, seriously. That is not what we want from Star Trek, right? I'm really glad that it was Una that turned herself in. I'm not quite sure that how the lawyer got there so easily, I guess. That could have been a little bit stronger, I think. But great stuff. Okay, so who would gain? Yes. So on to this. All right, so they put Una on the stand, which they weren't going to do. I mean, she flat out tells her, and this is a cool thing. This is not manipulative. I was very pleased. She says, if we put you on the stand, they're going to go after Pike. And that's exactly what happens. And I was so happy about that. Because if a writer or a character is going to make a promise like that, it has to happen. Right? Don't do it just to scare us and then make it not happen. That's manipulative. That's bad. Right? Good. So they put Una on the stand. And the reason we don't know this in the episode yet, but the reason she puts Una on the stand is she needs Una to use all of the words that a person would use when asking for asylum. It is very clearly laid out in the law of Starfleet what you need to say to request asylum. Now, Una did not request asylum, but she uses those words on the stand. This was also a tiny bit weak for me, but I do want to go back and reinstate that this is probably the best courtroom drama that we've had in Star Trek, because they actually had this in there. They had a plan, right? I mean, this could have been any other show, to be perfectly honest. I'm glad that it was Star Trek because it fits the characters better and it does what Star Trek wants to do better. But Una, in telling her story, uses all of the words that are needed in the law in order for her to request asylum. So the lawyer can say, she requested asylum, Pike granted it. It's that simple. You can't put her in prison because she was requesting asylum. It's kind of a leap, right? She did break the law, but it gave, I believe, this is a way that I justify it as the storyteller, I guess. I believe it gave the judges an out. It gave them a way to say, we don't want to get rid of Una. She's amazing. And we don't think she's going to flip out and start killing people. We think she's okay. So we don't want to get rid of her. So let's do this asylum thing. That's great. We'll do the asylum thing. We'll let her keep her job. That's kind of my justification for it, because I don't feel like they were in a position where that was the only answer they could give. It could have gone either way. It really could have. But because it's Starfleet and because Una is so good at her job, I think they just decided to say, let's just pretend like none of this ever happened. It's fine. You're an augment. We're aware of it. We're going to keep it on the down low. Don't kill anybody. Here we go. Right? So it was okay. It actually was an okay courtroom drama, which I appreciated, in addition to being a massively important, cool Star Trek episode. Right? It doesn't have to be a good courtroom drama to be a good Star Trek episode. I just appreciate the fact that it kind of was. It almost was. It was cool. Good. Okay, so she says all the words she needs to say, and then the bad guys get up and they bring in Pike, right? And they want to go after Pike, and he's very evil, this person, right? He has no emotion. He's very Vulcan, and it's weird because it really works. I mean, you really don't like these prosecutors, right? She's okay because like when she's reading the law out loud, she has to read the law out loud for the judges, right? So when she's reading the law, she's all happy because she realizes that the other lawyer is going to get Una off, right? Going to save her. So yeah, so she's okay, but the Vulcan is really the bad guy, right? The Vulcan is like, nope, fact, machine, get her. You know? So the Vulcan gets up, starts going after Pike. It's clearly turning into a witch hunt. He wants to go after the whole crew, right? Um, and then they go right into the closing arguments, which is good because we don't need Pike to get on the stand. We don't need any of that other stuff, right? Basically, the episode's over. The Una's speech was just so good, and then bringing up that law, we all know what's going to happen, which is great. Okay, it's basically over. The bad guy does get to say their thing, and then they go into closing arguments. I guess the bad guy's assuming that it'll be a different trial. Well, they'll bring the whole crew in and blah, blah, blah. Right? But the closing argument for the bad guys, very straightforward, and it's over. The closing argument for the good guy is good, okay? It's good and it's important. But it's way too long. The repeated beats in that speech are just intense. And then you couple that with flashbacks from 3 minutes ago. They are pounding this thing home. And I don't know if there is a time requirement on Paramount Plus for Star Trek. I don't know. It could be part of the contract. I do wish they would have added somewhere else if they needed to pad it out a little bit. Because that closing speech, it's so... Una's speech is so poignant. And then hearing that law is so great. And then the first third or fourth of that opening speech, the first beat, is great. It sums it up. It's done, right? But then it just keeps going. I tried to write this down a little bit. The flashbacks, of course. We just watched it, right? We don't need to hear that she said the exact word, especially because that doesn't make her asking for asylum. She didn't even realize that's what she was doing, right? Like, I don't know. It's a little tricky. There's 4 beats that she goes through. She wraps it up, starts again. And the second beat is just a repeat of the first beat. And then the third beat is just a repeat of the first beat and the second beat. And it's weird because it's all about you can do the right thing. You can do the right thing. And I feel like the judge, after about the third time, is going to say, I get it. I get it. You know? So I really wish they would have trimmed that down a little bit. What is being said is wonderful. It has to be said. I don't know if it has to be said 4 times in a row. And that's the weird thing, right? Because that's where you begin to wonder, did it help our situation for her to say that 4 times, or did it hurt it? You know? I watched the ups and downs of this episode, which they loved it, of course. I mean, it's a great episode. It's a great episode. But what they brought up is they didn't like seeing the flashbacks, right? And he talked about it like, it's just a personal pet peeve of mine. I don't think other people, right? But the reality is, if it bugged him and it bugged me, then it probably, and bugged is the wrong word, right? It hurt the landing of the whole thing, right? Not in a huge way. This is a very important, amazing episode. But to really get down to the fine nuts and bolts of this thing, that ending was too long. It was too much. And I do believe that if I dig deeper, I would find more people that would have a complaint that sort of tied to that, right? He didn't say the ending was too long. He said he didn't like flashbacks that happened 2 minutes ago. But I believe his dislike of that is a symptom of it going too long. If they would have cut that down to 1 beat and probably taken out the flashbacks because they really didn't need them, right? I believe that landing would have stuck. I mean, just bam. You know? And it's still stuck. It's still great. I mean, this episode's a 10. Easy 10. No questions asked. Easy 10. Right? I like to nitpick. I like to get right down to the fine details of things. And I believe that they should have just had one beat at the end, not four. She didn't need to reinstate that so much. One beat would have been just fine. Just said she asked for asylum. She deserves it. And you all know it. And that's it, you know. But excellent episode. And it's kind of funny because at the end of the episode, Dana leaned over to me, my wife leaned over to me and said, it's crazy that Star Trek is still trying to fix the same problems that it's been trying to fix since the beginning. Over 60 years, it's been trying to fix the same problem. You know, I mean, it's insane. It's insane that we can't. I don't know. We have no memory. You know, our I don't know how. And it gets kind of silly. Of course, we die, right? And because we die, we lose the thing. It's hard to pass on the things that you've learned to a young person because a young person already thinks they know everything, right? For one. And the subtlety of it is what's hard to convey, right? Because all you can say is quit treating people poorly, right? Treat everybody with respect. But that doesn't convey the terrible things that humans are capable of and have done and still do. You know, we can't keep that knowledge of, wow, we are a disaster. We're the worst things around. And we need to work on that, you know. We can't keep that. And if we could keep that, then we could get better. We could work toward Star Trek. The reason I love Star Trek, of course, is because it suggests that everything might turn out all right. But I don't think so. You know, I'm a bit too cynical about it, to be honest with you. I imagine that we'll just tear ourselves apart within the next 200 years because we have a population problem, of course, right? We're going to get to the point. Star Trek came up with all these fancy things to fix our problems. The two biggest being, we can travel anywhere in the galaxy. So we can, of the thousands of planets that we can live on, we'll just pick 100 of them and go move there, right? We don't have that technology. Star Trek just made it up. If we get that, then we don't have to worry so much about population, right? But number two, they also came up with the matter converter, which to me is probably the biggest one, right? The internet's huge. That computer where you can say, computer, what happened in blah, 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 right? And the computer just knows. That's the internet. And that's incredible. They predicted it and we got it. And it has changed our society forever. We're a lot more global than we used to be. And it's due to the internet, right? That's an incredible thing. But it's nowhere near matter conversion, right? If we could walk up to a machine and say, make me a bar of gold, right? And it just appears out of thin air, or it converts air into gold, right? That's incredible. If we could turn nuclear waste into hamburgers, that's incredible. And the ability to go anywhere so that land is limitless, right? There's no need to charge for land in Star Trek because it's everywhere. You can go anywhere within a week and have 10 acres to yourself, right? Which is incredible. And you can have anything you want come out of this little box. Those two inventions, I think, make a good future for humans possible. But I don't see them as reasonable within the time frame that we probably have left, I don't think that's going to happen, right? Because we're not focused on it, for one. You know, traveling further is not truly a goal of ours. We do space stuff. We do it. I know that Elon Musk wants to go find a gold asteroid and bring it home for himself and his wife. You know, I know that's a thing. And he's going to work on rocket engines so he can get to that asteroid. You know he is, right? Because he's an idiot. He's not thinking about the big picture. He's thinking about himself, as all rich people do. And rich is a skill. There are people who would look at me and definitely say, you're the problem. You know what I mean? I get that. You know, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite. It's just that the ultra wealthy are the gap is so big, you know. There really isn't a middle class. There's rich and lower middle. I don't want to say poor because there's still a lot in here, but it's getting crushed down and down, you know. Yeah, it's crazy to me that there was a time when one person could support a household. And I'm not talking about harking back to the good old days or any weird crap. I'm just saying one person's income used to be enough to support, 4 people who owned a home? One person could go to work and support that whole thing. Now, 2 people working really isn't enough, which is insane, right? We're just losing control is really what's happening. Everything's just sort of, we're not focused on making life better for everybody. We're only focused on making life better for a couple people, which is just crazy. And I believe in America, the reason that that's true is because we all hope to be one of those couple of people. We all think we're going to win the lottery tomorrow. We don't want to do anything to hurt the rich because we're going to win the lottery tomorrow. We'll be one of them, and then we'll be hurting ourselves. Why would somebody hurt themselves, right? Which is just insanity. It's pure insanity. But it's what we're stuck in. It's our American dream, you know. So I love that Star Trek has this positive future hope for us. I really appreciate that, and I cling to that. I don't think we're getting there. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do like that exists. All right. My kitty's had enough. I assume everybody probably has. So thank you so much. Have a great night.